morning, dear students. In today's lesson, under the theme of Unit 1 Great Inventions, we are going to cover the topic The Race, which is an autobiography of Clive James. Now, Clive James was born on 7th October 1939, the year World War II began, and he died on 24th November 2019 due to natural causes. He was an Australian critic and journalist, broadcaster, and writer who lived and worked in the United Kingdom from 1962 until his death in 2019. He began his career specializing in literary criticism before becoming television critic for The Observer in 1972. He achieved mainstream success in the UK, first as a writer for television and eventually as the lead in his own programs, including on television. The extract that we will read is from his autobiography titled Unreliable Memories. If you notice, the first few lines that I have written on the slide, they are in italic. This is the opening line from his autobiography. He says, and I quote, I was born in 1939. The other big event of that year was the outbreak of the Second World War, but for the moment, that did not affect me. From the very first statement of the autobiography, we can detect that Clive James is going to give us plenty of entertainment along with plenty of humor throughout his biography. In the first installment of Clive James' memoirs, we follow the young Clive on his journey from boyhood to the cusp of manhood, when his days of wearing short trousers are finally behind him. Battling with school, girls, various relatives, and an overwhelming desire to become a superhero, Clive's adventures growing up in the suburbs of post war Sydney are hair raising, uproarious, and almost too good to be true. Told with James' unassailable sense of humor and self-effacing charm, Unreliable Memoirs is a hilarious and touching introduction to the story of a national treasure. A million copy bestseller, this classic memoir is a celebration of life in all its unpredictable glory. So, when we come to your text, in the book, it says the following text. The Race comes from autobiography of the writer and journalist Clive James. He has spent most of his adult life in Britain, but he grew up in Australia, where he was born in 1939. Here he writes about racing his homemade billy cart. Now, what is a billy cart? As you can see in the picture, a billy cart is basically a homemade it is basically a simple ride which the children in Australia and America they make on their own. It is considered very creative. It shows the creativity and independence of the young children. They do all the work on it on their own. Today you must have seen how go-karts or such machines are very sophisticated, but back in 1939 or when back in the 1940s, late 1940s, when Clive James was roughly 9 to 12 years old, 9 to 10 years old, things were very different. It was made with simple homemade, items available at home. The seats were made out of old wooden boxes, nailed into frame of wood panels, which were used for fencing to make fences. And he took off wheels from an old pram to make and use them. Now, throughout this extract from his autobiography, Clive James uses exaggeration, humor, and careful structuring of the ideas in order to be creative and entertaining, to create an entertaining text for his readers, which builds towards the anticipated disaster of the crash. James uses self deprecating humor in describing his effort at building a go kart compared to the other children's, while there's a little like a diving aeroplane. A simile which emphasizes their speed only, and grace. If you notice in paragraph 1, um, if you notice in oh, where did the cursor go? If you notice in paragraph 1, Clive makes a simile like a diving stuka. That is, while other children, their go-karts or their billy carts were noisy, and he makes a comparison. He uses a simile over here, um, comparing it with that of a stuka. Hence, you can say that, and a Stuka, you will read at the end of the text that it was a German bombarder aircraft which could quickly dive and go back up, and it was very noisy. It goes on to show and emphasize the fact that children love to be noisy. They love things that are noisy and create a lot of noise, and they are very creative as well. And then he later on explains the text. In paragraph 1, he says that I could not build go karts very well. Other children made superb carts with wooden frames and wheels that screamed on the pavement like a diving aeroplane. The best I could manage was a fruit box with silent rubber wheels taken off an old pram. Okay. Now, the noise was indescribable. Again, I will emphasize the fact that Clive has used a simile. Also, he has over here when he says the noise was indescribable, he has used exaggeration. Okay. So he says, he later goes on to say, explain that after school and at weekends, boys came from all over the town to race along our street. There would be 20 or 30 carts. The noise was incredible. Um, in paragraph 2, he explains the route and the route that the race takes. He goes on to explain that the go-karts racing down the pavement on one side had a straight run of about a quarter of a mile all the way to the park. The carts could reach such high speeds that it was impossible for the rider to get off. All he could do was crash when he got to the end. Um, on one side of the road, we could go only half as far before a sharp right angle turn into Irene Street. The back wheels slid round the corner, leaving black smoking trails of burnt rubber or skidded in a shower of sparks. Now, because Clive's cart had pram wheels which had rubber on them. Hence, he used another thing that he shares over here is that he had the mastery. He he was master of a trick. Now, what was this trick? That he could, wait, I'll explain. His trick was that he could lean over off the body and then slide the back wheels, which got me around the corner unscathed, leaving black smoke trails of burnt rubber. Okay, Clive was master of this trick over explained over here. Okay, so while he had expertise, other children, what happened to them? They bumped into they bumped at the end of wait they bumped into at the end. Now, coming to paragraph 3, Clive explains how Clive is explaining the twist in the plot. um, the Irene Street corner was made more dangerous by Mrs. Bathwaite's puppies. Mrs. Bathwaite lived in the house on the corner. We all thought that she was a witch. We believed that she poisoned cats. She was also a keen gardener. Her flower beds held the area's best collection of poppies. She had been known to phone the police if even one of her poppies was picked by a passer-by. This is the gist of paragraph 3. Um, and then he goes on to explain that it was vital to make the turn into Irene Street without hurting a single poppy. Otherwise, the old lady would probably come out shouting, oh, sorry, come out shooting. Usually, when the poppies were in full bloom, nobody dared make the turn. Um, the writer did because he thought that he was skillful enough to make the turn safely. From paragraph 4 onwards, I would give the text a read so that things will become more clearer, because here is the climax of the story. I'm reading paragraph 4. At the time I'm talking about, Mrs. Barnwaite's poppies were all in bloom. It was essential to make the turn without hurting a single hair of a poppy's head. Usually, when poppies were in bloom, nobody dared make the turn. I did, not out of courage, but because in my ponderous cart there was no real danger of going wrong. I should have left it at that, but got ambitious. One Saturday afternoon, when there was a particularly large turnout, I got sick of watching the ball race carts howling to glory down the far side. I organized the slow carts. Wait. I organized the slower carts like my own into a train. Every cart except mine was deprived of its front axle and loosely bolted to the cart in front. The whole assembly was about a dozen carts long with a big box cart at the back. I was the only one alone on his cart. Behind me, there was two or even three to every cart until you got to the box cart, which was crammed full of little kids, some of them so small that they were holding toy collars and sucking dummies. Sucking dummies, pacifier that babies put in their mouth when they want to be soothed out and don't want to cry. From its very first turn, from its very first run down the far side, my supercar was a triumph. Even the adults who had been hosing us called their families out to marvel as we went steaming by. On the supercar's next run, there was still more to admire, since even the top flight ball race riders had demanded to have their vehicles built into it, thereby heightening its tone, swelling its passenger list, and multiplying its already impressive output of decibels. Once again, I should have left well alone. The thing was already famous. It had everything but a dining car. Why did I ever suggest that we should transfer it to the near side and try the Irene Street turn? Now, till here, if you notice, um, what has Clive done? He has arranged, um, he has made an arrangement. He has changed the way the billy cart looks. He has other than his own billy cart, he has removed the axle, the front axle on which the front two wheels work. He has removed them and added them to the back. I'll try to show you a picture of what is happening so that you can understand the idea. Now, as you can see, over here, the front, as you can see in the picture, this is what the train of billy carts look like. Can you see? This is the main billy cart, which will still have its front axle and its ropes, which or the steering. And then for the rest, one, two, three different billy carts have been added, and children are sitting on them. And you can see that their front wheels have been removed and their axle, their main rod, has been attached to the front one. And dummy and their another word that is used over here at the end of paragraph 4 is that some of the children were so young that they were holding toy koalas. This is what a koala bear looks like. Koala bear is basically a marsupial which belongs to the Australian continent only. And since it is one of the fundamental animals of Australia, hence little babies use, they have teddy or toy collars which they, play with. And dummy is a pacifier which looks like this. Now that you understand the idea of the train, also note that another simile is being, not exactly a simile, but um, another comparison. He is now calling his train of billy carts as a super cart. Okay? And what has happened in paragraph 5? Other adults, the ones who earlier on, when they passed by, they were hosing at them, they were now calling their family members to come and, watch my supercart go. Marvel to come and have a look and admire. Marvel will mean admire. As it went steaming by. See, comparison, a simile. Another comparison is being made because he is calling his, billy carts as a train. Earlier on, he has called it a train into a train. Because he is making another comparison with that of a train, because a train steams by. Back in those days, you had those coal powered trains which gave off a lot of steam. Today we have electric trains which obviously do not need which do not give off any steam. Hence, because there is a comparison of the train of carts, his super cart, with that of a train. Hence, the vocabulary used will be compared with that of a train as well. Hence, the use of the word steaming. On the supercart's next run, there was still more to admire. Because why there was more to admire? Because the top speed, the top racers, the ones with the, ball bearing wheels, they wanted their carts to be added to this, to my train of billy carts. And obviously, that meant that there would be more people, heightening its tone, that is, heightening its noise and its length, swelling its passenger list, that is, adding more people. Sorry, I'm so sorry about this horrible mess. Swelling its passenger list, that is, increasing the number of passengers on board.
and multiplying its already impressive output of decibels. Decibel is the unit of sound, okay? Multiplying its output of decibels would mean that over here, before my supercart was more noisy compared to the single supercart. And now, since top flight ball racers, they had added to my train, obviously the noise has increased, it has multiplied. Okay? Notice the use of vocabulary. The sound, decibels, the sound is deafening. You have learned this word earlier on in grade 6 as well, deafening. So loud that one feels deaf. Okay. um and he again says this, even when all of this was done, I should have left well alone, that I should not have been part of it. Why? And because it was already famous, and now that it was famous, I should still have stopped, but I didn't. I was the one who proposed the idea of taking this super duper train to Irene Street. Disaster is going to strike. Why? Because in Irene Street lives Mrs. Barthway. With so much inertia, inertia is the speed. Have you read inertia in physics? I'd like you to look up inertia on Google. And if you know already what inertia is in physics, inertia is the tendency to do nothing or to remain unchanged, a property of matter by which it continues its existing state or rest or uniform body in a straight line unless that state is changed by an external force. Now, there was a lot of force, okay? With a lot of inertia, the supercart started slowly, but it accelerated like a piano falling out of a window. Long before we reached the turn, I realized that there had been a serious miscalculation. The miscalculation was all mine, of course. It was too late to do anything except pray. Whenever you are in a miscalculated situation, when you expect something to turn out the way you want, but it does not, when things go haywire, what do? You start praying. Alamya ji, like for example, you were told not to eat a slice of the last piece of cake, and you did. Why? Because that last piece of cake was kept for your mother, had kept for your father. And now that you have eaten the slice, you have nothing to do, but you start praying, Alamya ji, my mother doesn't find out. Please, Alamya, please, 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 Alamya, mujhe is dafa bacha le. Next time मैं ऐसे नहीं करूँगा, ठीक है? So what happens in such a desperate situation? We have nothing to do but pray. Leaning into the turn, I skidded my own cart safely around in the usual way. But the next few segments followed me, but with each segment describing an arc of slightly larger radius than the one in front. The first gradually. The next segments followed me, but with each segment describing an arc of slightly larger radius than the one in front. First, gradually, then with stunning finality, the monster lashed its enormous tail. Again, notice that the supercart, the train of supercart, the train of Billy Carts is again being compared to a monster lashing its enormous tail. Okay, this is going to be personification. Personification is when an inanimate object, when a non living thing is given the quality of a living thing. Monsters are real, okay? They are living beings. What the idea, although they are imaginary creatures, but anything monstrous is basically an a live thing, a living thing. So when an inanimate object, when a non-living thing is given the quality of a living thing, we say that over here the writer has used personification. So the train of billy carts is being compared to the monster. Number one, it is being compared to the monster, so it is a simile. And the way the end is lashing out, it like an enormous tail, it is personification. Okay. The air was full of flying ball bearings, bits of wood, big kids, little kids, koalas, and dummies. Most disastrously of all, it was also full of poppy petals. Not a bloom escaped the scythe. Scythe is, if you've ever seen a gardener use a tool that looks a bit like this. This is what the blade looks like. And then you have the handle at the back. This is what a scythe is. Okay, it is a tool used to cut off herbs or harvest crops or grass, etc. Okay, not a bloom escaped the scythe. Now, what is the scythe over here? Obviously, the metallic wheels will be are being compared to a scythe. Why? Because it is the wheels of the carts that have chopped off the blooms of poppies. Those of us who could still run scattered to the winds. That is, we quickly ran for our life. Scattered to the winds, we ran as fast as the wind so that we could escape this disastrous situation. Dragging our wounded with us. That is, dragging as many people as our friends who were all wounded, who were injured with us. Okay, we tried to flee from the situation. The police spent hours visiting all the parents in the districts, warning them that the Billy Cart era was definitely over. It was a police car that took Mrs. Barnwaits away. There was no point waiting for the ambulance. She could walk all right. It was just that she couldn't talk. She stared ahead, her mouth slightly open. The lady was not hurt. It was not that the lady was hurt. Now, this is the final, this is the end of the disaster has struck. Here, the disaster strikes, and this is the ending. Okay. Now, the disaster is that once the billy cart has hit, the end of the billy cart has hit into Mrs. Bathwaite's poppy, poppies growing in the garden and blooms, and because they are hitting into it, everything is just flying off, because and obviously it is the end, just like the end of the tail makes everything fly away. You must have seen something like that in a cartoon, or I'll try to share a picture or a video. Okay, now everything is just flying. The wheels, the wood, little children, big children, koalas and dummies, and in between all of it, the poppy petals as well. And all the blooms, they have been chopped off. And the children, they're trying to save themselves from a beating. They're dragging their wounded friends along with them. They're running off, escaping the situation, because this is such a disastrous situation. And then what happens? The police, they are they spent hours upon hours visiting each and every house in the district and warning the parents, telling them that definitely your children will no longer have billy carts. Why? Because your children, they have to all together Not one is to be blamed. All of the children together are to be blamed, and they have destroyed the precious poppy blooms. And what has happened to Mrs. Bathwaite? She has been taken to the hospital. Now, why is she taken to the hospital? Do you think she was hurt by one of the billy carts? No, she's not hurt. It's just that she was not taken in the ambulance. There was no point waiting for the ambulance, okay? Who took Mrs. Bathwaite away? A police car, okay? Now, why? She could walk all right. That is, there was nothing wrong with, physically, there was nothing wrong with her. It's just that she couldn't talk. She was stunned. She was stupefied. She was petrified. She was petrified. Why? She stared ahead. Oh, wait, I'll clear everything. She stared ahead. Her mouth slightly open. When does this happen? When do you stare and your mouth is like dropped open and you can't say a word? When something precious to you is horribly damaged. You are in a stoned state. So Mrs. Bathwaite was in a horrible, horrible situation. She couldn't speak. She was stupefied. Okay. With that, we come to the end of our lesson. Thank you very much. I hope you have understood the concepts well. Tomorrow, inshallah, we will do the question answers together, and I will try to make the lesson informative in the sense that I will use visuals to make the ideas stick in your head, okay? Stick in your memories. Thank you very much.